I'm Alec Touchton.
And I'm Nathan Touchton, and we're Carbos, and we're removing the barrier to entry into the carbon marketplace.
I think we identified the issue in the carbon marketplace when we first sort of stumbled upon it. And neither of us like to sit back and see things happen, so we kind of realized that we could solve this problem through technology, which is both of our backgrounds, and went after it.
We were really focused on what it would take to build a scalable piece of technology, and now we're more focused on building a scalable business.
Since Launch Camp, I think we've learned through XI the more holistic approach to starting a business. Before, when we were working on this by ourselves, we would work on it 100%, get totally burned out, and then have to take a couple weeks to a month off. But with XI, it's really taught us how to sustainably grow a business and not burn out.
It's cool to be in a space where everyone is sort of trying to tackle the same problems, but also different problems. So whereas we might not be working on this marketing issue yet, watching people go through it, the questions that they're asking, the things that are obviously not working for them, gives you a good idea when you get to that step, what do you need to be thinking about? So you get a little foresight just by hanging out with people that are going through the same sort of stuff. Getting to see our baby we've created actually take its first steps is going to be pretty incredible. And I think that the work we're doing at XI is going to be really important in ensuring that those first steps are successful.
Please welcome Nathan from Carbos to the stage.
Hello, my name is Nathan Touchton, and my brother Alec and I are the founders of Carbos, and we're removing the barrier to entry into carbon markets. And so to do that, we're building a platform that any landowner can use to determine whether they can create a carbon offset on their property and then get paid to protect that land by selling carbon offsets. So we want to start by getting into what a carbon offset is. And at its base level, when you have a source of emissions, and that can be a business, a person, a factory, that's putting greenhouse gas into the atmosphere, you also have ways to take that out of the atmosphere. And one of those ways is land protection. A tree takes carbon out of the atmosphere and puts it back into the ground. And so when the person or business that's emitting is paying someone to continue cleaning up after them, that's one way that you can become carbon neutral. And so this exchange of value is a carbon offset. You have someone that's paying another person to undo the harm that they've done to the atmosphere. And unfortunately, a lot of the markets that have developed around buying and selling carbon offsets are incredibly complicated. So I hope you're ready to get a little bit confused. Carbon offsets are typically held by these carbon registries, and those are scoped at either the state or at the highest, the national level. And they'll go out and they'll try to find land that makes a good carbon offset, so landowners have to work with them. They also have to work with any sort of third-party verifiers that they send out to do site visits and act certain methodologies to determine whether or not this could be a carbon offset. That's registered with the carbon registry, which then takes it to purchasers. Now, it can also bank that carbon or forward or backward sell it a number of years. There are derivative markets that come off of this, and other registries sometimes buy offsets from registries in order to remain solvent. But the original registry pays out the landowner. Now, that landowner has to keep working with that chain and any sort of changing verifiers or methodologies, and a lot of the detail of what goes on there is kept behind an NDA. So it's obviously a very complicated system, and there's been problems that have arisen from this complication. One of them being that these registries are sort of incentivized to commit fraud, because in order to remain solvent, it's in their best interest to turn a blind eye to any sort of malpractice on behalf of those landowners, double selling, or any inconsistencies in what those verifiers are measuring. It's also very costly for them to create offsets this way, and extremely inefficient. A lot of times those verifications processes are being conducted via site visits overseas or into very remote areas. And this means that it's not financially feasible for registries to create offsets that aren't massive. So they have to go out and find the biggest pieces of land they can to build offsets on, because that's what's best for their bottom line. And this tells us a story about conservation where we're only incentivizing or valuing conservation action when it's taken on a massive scale. And obviously that's not true. We think that this image really highlights the pitfalls of thinking about carbon offsetting that way. You have a city like Denver. We have air quality problems, we have emissions problems. Denver, using this traditional registry model, could invest in 100% carbon neutrality by protecting forests that are in Cambodia, in Siberia, in Canada, without spending a single dollar to make Denver a better place. And ironically, Denver's sitting at the foot of the Rockies, a massive carbon sink in the Great Plains, which is another tremendous carbon resource. And those are the places we should be looking first when we're trying to offset carbon. These are the counties in Colorado where the average parcel size is smaller than 50 acres. So again, those are places that traditional carbon offset registries cannot create offsets. And for everyone who lives here, you can also quickly realize that these are the places where we all live. These are the places that are most at risk for overdevelopment and where we're going to receive the most benefit from land protection. So when it comes to that traditional model, we like to say they externalize a lot of the benefits that come from carbon offsetting. But by being able to create offsets that are in these places, we can ensure that additional benefits like runoff prevention, air quality improvements, habitat for local wildlife, just psychologically having access to open space is something that we receive. And this is what Carbos is trying to build. Our platform is a place where any landowner can create an offset themselves, where we still use those same ISO standards and IPCC methodologies traditional carbon registries use, but we streamline the process and cut out some of those expensive middlemen. And this means that offset purchasers can come to our platform to buy offsets when, and very importantly, where it makes the most sense for them to be offsetting. And we can do this in part because our offsets are being issued as a digital token. And we're able to do that in a publicly transparent and verifiable way. And that reduces our fraud liability and allows offset purchasers to choose where to invest that's going to have the biggest positive impact for themselves and their community. Now, we have a percentage-based fee structure so that it always makes financial sense for landowners to create an offset through Carbos. We're a software solution, so we're taking extra measures to ensure that it's painless to buy, sell, and create offsets on our platform. And really what we're doing is we're telling a different story about conservation, one where we are valuing all conservation action equally, regardless of its scale. In an urban environment, a carbon offset can be as small as planting a single tree. In a rural environment, it can be as massive as setting aside 30,000 acres of forest, and both of those things are possible on Carbos. Now, what are carbon offsets really worth? Well, it turns out they're growing exponentially. The price of carbon per ton has eclipsed $25 a ton, and it's on its way to $50 a ton in the next 3 to 5 years, which means that carbon offset trading is going to have a $2 trillion market cap relatively soon. And yet, of the carbon that's being traded, less than a third of it is representative of land-based offsets. So there's other types of carbon offsets: clean energy, electric vehicles, emissions reductions. None of those actually remove carbon from the atmosphere, but there are other types of carbon offsets. Land is a very underutilized resource. According to the USGS, there are 5 trillion tons of carbon stored and sequestered in the United States alone. And yet the United States only produces about 2 billion tons of carbon offsets that are based on land. So it's a very small fraction of our potential. Poking that a little bit further, about a third of the land in the United States is small parcels. So those are places that traditional offset registries can't create offsets and aren't looking to. We see that as sort of our niche market. And if we're able to just capitalize on 10% of those small parcels, we eclipse the volume of the US carbon market by almost double. So while these are small parcels, their impact when conglomerated is not small. It's massive both financially and in terms of our overall conservation. Now that said, carbon offsets are definitely a buyer's market. There's a lot of different types of offsets, but of all of them, land-based offsets are typically the most in demand and fetch the highest prices. And now we're adding additional value beyond that by issuing our offsets as a digital token. And we do that by attaching metadata that's specific to that offset project to the token. So this isn't just a number on a piece of paper and a feel-good certificate in the mail. This is actually a description of the conservation action itself. Is this a forest? Is this a grassland? Where exactly am I investing in carbon neutrality? And that allows businesses to choose to reinvest rather than just become carbon neutral in an externalized way. And this is what Carbos actually looks like on the ground. So this is our first land-based offset that we registered just a couple weeks ago. It's a 640-acre parcel, a square mile in Bent County, Colorado. That's much too small for a traditional registry to look at, but through Carbos, we're able to bring it to market as an offset for 400 tons of carbon. And just to put that in perspective, it's about 20 people's annual footprint for the average American. And that means that this landowner can monetize that property for protection rather than for development or agriculture, generate about $4,000 a year in revenue by selling that as a carbon offset. So Colorado is actually a state that's incredibly rich in land resources and in people who really care about this state, who love it, who want to make it a better place. And when we bring those two things together through Carbos, we're able to create offsets like this. And that's a way we can give businesses a chance to reinvest in this state, to direct their carbon neutrality investments back into Colorado, make this a better place for all of us. So our team, like I said, myself, my brother, we both have degrees in software development. On top of that, we have about 6 years combined experience working in land protection and restoration, both the government and private sector. And more importantly, we've been living this our whole lives. Our father, who's here tonight, is an environmental lawyer, and so all of our family vacations were road trips across the US looking for rare and endangered species. Thank him for it. He was writing conservation easements while we were learning how to spell, and so that's been very helpful. It's really in our blood, and we've been working on this passionately for about a year and a half. We've had some success at hackathons, notably Go Code Colorado 2018, ETH Denver's Impact Track this year, and we couldn't be more excited to be working on Carbos. So our ask for all of you today is if you think you would want to create a carbon offset through our platform or offset your footprint through our platform, or you know someone who could create a carbon offset or offset through Carbos, visit carbos.co. We expect our beta to be out sometime early next year, and in the meantime, stay tuned with our Twitter or our newsletter. So again, thank you for coming out. It means a lot to us and all the other teams at XI, so thank you.